We'll be starting the session now. So a bit of like, if you don't know me, I'll be introducing myself. So I'm Sagar. I'm third year now at ISC NITE and MIT. Uh, I've been using Linux for probably like the past 6 years. I mean, I installed Ubuntu back in 2013, and Windows became a bit more sucky after that. So yeah, I'm pretty comfortable at using Linux, so I thought I'd like hold a workshop. So I think that's like enough as a introduction. Yash, can you tell them about the questions thing?
Yeah, so again, thank you everyone for joining us today. And so, if you guys have any questions that you want to ask, you can drop them in the chat. Or if you want to have a verbal communication, you can use the raise my hand option. So we'll unmute you and you'll be able to talk. So yeah, that's all. And enjoy the seminar. So yeah, Sagar, take it away.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to start. So for those of you who don't have an idea of what Linux is the Linux kernel. So it's free open source software. It's like many companies pay people to work on the Linux kernel. So because the Linux kernel is used by pretty much every server, like basically your WhatsApp server, your Facebook server, it's a Linux server. Windows is nowhere to be seen. More 100% of the top 100 supercomputers all use Linux, so it's a big thing. It's a monolithic kernel. That means it's everything is baked into like one thing. So, for example, your device drivers, your process schedulers, everything is baked into one thing. You can extend it using modules, and it's a Unix-like system, and you already all know that. I'm not going to go into it too bit. Like it's using embedded systems and all that stuff. So again, so now this thing is a bit thing. So Linux is just the kernel alone. Okay. So the software that this whole thing that you're seeing here is actually GNU Linux, and many people take it seriously that you have to specify that you're using GNU Linux. All this like the genome or GNOME, so desktop environment is everything is GNU like GNU software. So you should be aware when you're talking about the Linux and GNU Linux. So I'll be uploading this to Git, so you can read about it later. There's a Wikipedia link here. So yeah, one more thing about thing is Linux. Everything is a file. So for example, the main directory in Linux is the root directory. So if I list the contents of the root directory, you'll get a lot of options. So all this is already like given here. So this is a command which you can like execute to get this type of format. So the bin directory. So the bin directory is where all your necessary program binary files are. So for example, your cat, your file, your copy command, move command, all that stuff is stored here. Your boot command holds all the necessary boot files. Your kernel image, which is the Linux kernel image, is stored here. Your dev is like your device drivers, your device files, your printer file, like the file that is used to connect your printer and all that is stored here. And even like something like your how did I put it? Like all the devices, so your hard disk, your partitions, and everything is stored here as files. So you can connect to them to like a file, sort of. Etc. is like again, etc is again system-wide config file. So any software that you want to write config to, like configuration to, and you want to apply to everybody in your system, like throughout all the users, you'll have to like make changes here. Home is again, this is pretty standard. Home is where all the home directories for every user is. So that's nothing that everybody knows about that. Library files are something that you use to like extend binaries. So for example, bin might take something from library to extend its function. So again, that's a bit gross simplification, but there's a lot of things to it, so I have to like simplify it. Lib64 is again 64-bit library extensions. Lost plus found is again, this is sometimes you get this, sometimes you don't. It's more about like whenever you're doing disk your disk integrity checks, it will store all the corrupted data here. And mount is temporary mount location. So for example, say you put your USB, you connect your USB to your system, your Linux will automatically mount it to some temporary mount location. So it will usually be like MNT. OPT is optional application software. So this is again, like I don't generally see it used much, but you can look into it if you want. Proc is process and kernel information. So like every program you run, every like kernel process that is there, it will be stored here as files, so you can look into it and see what is running. Okay, so root is generally like a lot of people get confused about this. So root is not the root. So this is root. So all this is root. This root is the home directory for the root user. So I'll be getting into root users and groups later, shortly. Okay, run is basically what the last system that like the last login that you did, whatever stuff was running or whatever you did, all the information will be stored in this particular directory. Sbin is again, these are like system binaries. So for example, something that only the system can access and not like every user can access will be stored here. So it's directly pointing to USR bin. I'll get it to that shortly. SRV is again, I don't see it used much, but it's used for servers and version control. I'm not sure about, so I'm not so sure about this because I haven't used it much. Sys is, Sys is like has information about all the devices that are connected to it. For example, your sensors, so your CPU sensors, your motherboard sensors, your hard disk sensors, all of that is stored in the sys directory. So if you go into the sys directory, there'll be like thermal, there'll be like sensors and stuff like that. You can check it. Don't edit anything, because if you edit something, if you don't know what you're doing, you can mess up your entire system. Any change you make into your root directory is permanent. You can't reverse it. So be careful. Temp is temporary files. So whatever a program wants to store stuff temporarily, you can store it here. Okay, so USR is not user. Okay, so many people get confused about this. It's Unix system resources. So anything that is needed system-wide will be stored here. So take note of that. It's read only. So it's not user, it's Unix system resources or universal system resources for Linux, but generally people call it Unix system resources. Okay, var is variable files. So variable files can be anything from log files. So log files are something that whenever you run your program, it will store its log. So log is like whatever process it was running or whatever you did with the program, it will be stored here. So there was any error, you can check these files and you can see what went wrong, so you can fix it. So those increase whenever you start like using the program, right? So those are variable files. Okay, so that is that. So now let me go into, so ls is used for listing directories. So lsla is something that, okay, so ls-l is used for long listing the directories. So if I do this and I scroll up, okay, so the information says that there are like 2,097,232 files here. So I already explained this, so I'm not going to touch that. I'm going to like focus on these three columns. Okay, so this means it's either a link or a directory, right? So you can see here bin is pointing to your USR bin. So that means it's like a shortcut. So whatever is in bin can be accessed in USR bin. So Windows shortcuts, right? So that's what linking means. So there are hard links and soft links. You can check them out on Google. That's a bit complicated to get into right now. Okay, so directories are again. So this is a directory. So directories are also files in Linux. So like remember that directories just contain the files of inside the directory. So it contains the locations of where those files exist. So whenever you open them, it accesses those locations. So this is your user permission. So for example, the root user owns this particular directory, and the root group can access this particular directory. So the root user can read, write, execute. Okay, but the root group, okay, this is a permission for the root group. It can only read and execute. It can't write to it. And this, okay, so this is again, this is, many people get confused about this. This is not like, this means that basically anybody other than the, like that particular user or any user of that particular group can access it. So say for example, any user who doesn't own the file, who is not part of the root group, can read and execute this file or this directory. Okay, so excuse me. So this is the, I mean, I'm not going to get into all that. Okay, I think that's about it. So all like basically it's mostly the same. This is like a default Ubuntu install. So I've given links in the thing, so I can go into more depth. Like there are YouTube links. I'll be uploading it to GitHub, so you can check that out. So yeah, okay. So I've talked about users, and I have to talk about groups. So there are, okay, so groups are basically collection of users. So they're basically meant to give like privileges to a set of users, or give a user a particular like more privilege or less privilege. So there are two types of groups. Primary groups, which are basically the user which creates that particular file. Okay, So if he creates the file, he'll have all, he basically owns the file, or he, she, or whatever. He owns the file, so he can do whatever he wants with the file. So that user is part of the primary group. But a secondary group is somebody like, okay, so I create the file, but I give somebody else read, write, execute permissions of it. So I need to add that particular user to my group. So for example, there's a group called Sagar, and I create a file called text. So because I created the file text, I can like read, write, execute to it, but anybody else can't. So if I add, say, my friend to Sagar, the group Sagar, they can access the file and they can read, write, execute to it. So that's basically what group management is. So you can check about, again, you can check Google for that. So one more thing is you can okay, so there's one handy trick you can find. So instead of typing clear every time, you can actually just press Control L. So Control, like L for Lotus, so it automatically clears the file. So you can list all the groups that are present for your particular system. So if you do this, wait. Oh wait, I'm already in root. Okay, no, my bad. Okay, wait. CD. It's worked on my system. Why isn't it working on Ubuntu? Huh. Okay, it was group, not groups. Okay, my bad. Okay, so okay, it's that getend. Don't worry about that. That's just another command. Okay, so cat etc. Yeah, okay. So it's cat etc group. Okay, so the group thing holds all the information about every group that is there. So if you can see, go down here, you can see that my user, which is called phone, is here, and it has the user ID 1000. Okay, so again, you can check what groups your user is a part of by putting this. So I'm a part of all these particular groups. So you can see I'm a part of the sudo group. So that means I'm an administrator because this is my system. Okay, so one more thing is I already talked about permissions. You can check out chmod again. So there are links here you can check out. You can check out a GitHub repo. I'll like update it later. You can read all of this. So now, okay, so I'm going to talk about paths. So a lot of people talk about paths. So let's check what a path is. So you can see that all of this is here. So a path is basically something that any script or any binary or any like file that you have can be accessed throughout your particular user or your particular system. So for example, usr local /sbin. So that means any binary put into that particular file or that particular directory can be accessed through the shell. So for example, I have home pwn /bin. Okay, so if we go there, so if you go there, okay, so this is what is contained here. Okay, so there's a binary called hello, and there's a file called hello.c. So hello.c, if you go into it, let me just. Okay, so if I just, so I'm going to be using Vim. So if you're not familiar with it, it's a pretty nice like text editor. So this is a basic hello world file. It's nothing special. So okay, again, so hello is not a inbuilt command. So if I try to get documentation for it, so man is short for manual pages. So all your like all the software that you install will have manual pages for it. That's how software works. If the software that you install doesn't have man pages, then you'll have to go for the internet. That's not good practice. So if I type man hello, there is no manual entry for hello. So like, okay, so now, but even though there's no manual entry for hello, I can press hello and it can like it'll print it out because this particular directory has access to the whole like is in the path basically. Okay, I think that's more than enough. You can actually like okay, so how you choose how to make the path is you can directly specify it in the terminal. So for example, here you can say, okay, so I want to put home bin as my path. There's another way of doing it. So you can specify, there's a shortcut. So home bin. So home will automatically like replace it with whatever your home is, your home path is. So and then you do that, and then you have to specify the rest of the path. So the system will like already specify like a set path, and it will like automatically like extend it to that. So once you do that, now that's already there in the path, so it made no difference. But you can add any other folder, or you can add any basically any other folder to the path. Another thing is, okay, so I'll go into a little bit about source. So I have the source. Wait one sec. So okay, I messed up the path. Wait one sec. What did I do? Did I mess up the path? Initial access. Okay, I can access that. Why can't I access ls? Huh. Okay. Okay. So I don't know what I did, but I'll like move on. So there are many different commands here. If I set and debug now, it will be. Oh wait. Okay. If I set and debug now, it will be again. I can't use ls, so that's a problem. Okay. So okay, there are different commands that you can use. So one is again cp. So if I go to, okay, I have to fix it then. Okay, let me see what went wrong. Wait, let me check what my path is. Did I mess up something? Okay, wait, sorry about this. Okay, that's why I messed up. Okay, I will go into the what I just did there. Don't worry. So hopefully it's okay. It's still not working. Okay, I'll do one thing. I'm just gonna add bin to. Okay, it's working now. Okay, sorry about that. Excuse me. Okay, so there are a few commands that I wanted to get into. So there is something called cp. So cp is again is used to copy files. So for example, if I go to my folder, okay, so there's a command called, okay, so I want to create a new file just to test everything. So for example, say I create something called test.txt. Okay, so I want to copy this to another directory, or I want to make a copy of it. So the way it works is, so I'm going to like I'm going to include the source, and I'm going to make another thing. So it's, so if I ls again, so there'll be two files. So it's text1 and like test1 and test1. Now again, there's move command, so you can use that to move files around. I think you could, I don't need to get into this so much. It's very basic stuff. So I'll be going into a bit more advanced stuff. So okay, so grep is something that's very useful. So if I go into grep, it's basically for printing lines which match patterns. So for example, I have this file called Google 10,000 English. So it's basically the 10,000 most common English words. So for example, say I want to search if a particular word exists in a file. So I can say I want to search for the file called secret or the text called secret. So the way I do that is that, and then it'll give me every word which contains the word secret. So secretary, secret, secrets, and the secretariat. So the way you can do that for any kind of text. So for example, say I type the, okay, there's a lot of words for that. So yeah, grep is a useful command for finding stuff in strings. So okay, there's this one command I want to like talk about. So it's called strings. So I just included this picture of a cat. It's pretty cute. So what if there was something in this image that you wanted to read, but you can't read it here? Okay, so this strings, I mean, I haven't heard like seen a use for strings, so I made like a fun example. So strings can be used to find strings in every particular file. So text files obviously is just a bunch of strings, so it'll just print the entire file. But say for example, I want to find the like a list of strings of a file which isn't just a string file. So for example, a PNG file is not a bunch of strings, right? But there are strings inside the file. So wait, strings. Okay, so if I type strings cat.png, it'll give me all of this. But that doesn't like help me a lot. So usually messages are pretty long. So say for example, I do strings. Okay, so I want to find strings which are longer than say 15 characters or 20 characters. So the way I do that is using a command called awk. So awk is used for basically text generation. So it's a programming language in itself. So you can actually read about it. It'll help you a lot. So if you work with data science, awk is actually pretty useful. It's basically like data frames, but awk was created like in the 80s. Python was made in like the 90s. So there's a big difference. So the way you do that is there's this command, like there's this thing called, wait, no. So this is basic syntax. So I'm basically trying to find if the length of, so hash 0 means the name of the file. So that will like extend to cat.png. That'll like the $0 will get replaced with cat.png. So if I want to check if the length of any like the strings dot so pipes again is something that you should be like, so whatever output of this particular file will be pushed to this particular awk. So say cat dot, if I like execute strings.png, all this particular stuff will come. So if I want to push this to another command without knowing, like the awk doesn't know that strings exist. It just gets, so the shell automatically pipes whatever this output was to awk. So awk just gets the strings and it finds which string is bigger than 15 characters. Okay, so this particular thing will like basically again it'll find that this whole particular command will find any character which is greater than 15. So if I execute this now, wait. Again, did I mess up somewhere? Okay. 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 Okay, so this particular thing, what I'm doing here is I'm appending to like, so this greater than symbol is basically I want to pipe the output of this command. So whatever command is like you type, I want to push it to like a text file or whatever, like whatever file you want. So if I do that, and if I do that, so there'll be a test.txt. So if I want to cat text, okay, it's empty. No, it's not executing. Okay, I'll get back to this. So cat again is used for finding anything. And so, for example, I have some scripts in. So I have scripts here, and I want to get. Okay, so there's this one thing called. Oh wait, sorry, my bad. Okay, so say for example, I want to output this particular thing. So it'll give me the contents of that particular file. Okay, so I'm going to go move on. This has wasted too much time. So there's a command called host name. So host name is basically gives you the name of your host. So it can be used if you're like communicating with servers and stuff like that. You can get the names of the host directly. Uname is again something that you get like so. Uname basically gives you the name of the system. So here is Linux, not so helpful. So if I like give it the argument all, it'll give me like everything. So it'll give me the type of system, the user like host name, the kernel version, when it was compiled, and all that stuff. So this particular time means it would like when the kernel was compiled, and it'll give the system architecture and all that stuff. So see here you can see it says GNU Linux. So remember, I just told you about like this like you need to like be careful when you like talk about the Linux kernel and the Linux software. So okay, there's another command called who am I. It'll give you the user who's currently logged in. Not so helpful. Who is a more thing. So it'll give you the list of all the users which are logged in. So currently I'm the only user who's logged in. So it'll give my user. Okay, so PS is process status. Not like generally you don't like look into this so much. So don't fret about it. Okay, so chown is, I'm not going to go into it, but I'm going to tell you that it exists. So chown basically, you can change the user, like the owner of the file. So for example, I own the file, but I want to like give the file permissions to somebody else, the ownership of the file. So I can do that using chown. So you can read the documentation here to like figure out how to do that. Okay, so we have RM. So RM is used for deleting directories. So I can make a directory using mkdir. So if I make a directory called test, so you can see that there's a directory called test. So if I want to delete it, I can use RM or I can use rmdir. So the directory is gone. Okay, touch you already saw what touch does. It basically creates an empty file. So I'm not going to go into that touch. Okay, so I'm going to teach you like a good command where you can like actually like get output of like relevant output. So say I get, so you're doing some network programming and you want some output. So curl is a utility where you can like download stuff or like work with URLs basically. So for example, say I contact the Google server so that they give me like the HTTP header. So it gives me this. So all this location is basically like it's the IP packet sends all this and I get it back. So okay, so for example, say this particular thing. Okay, so content length is one thing. So that means the content header or like the HTTP header that was sent to google.com or like the thing that we received was 219 bytes. So obviously you know that it's 219 bytes, but say for example you want to like automatically like get the value 219. You can do that using grep. So grep can okay, so there's an option called -i which handles uppercase and lowercase. So it even if there's an uppercase match for what you put in lowercase, it will still give you the result. So grep -i, and I can search for content length. So see the output significantly reduced. So all this reduced to just one line. So now I want only this particular file, like value. So how do I do that? Okay, so there's this like cool command called cut. So cut is again, it will cut the like columns. So there's two parameters that you need to like remember. So it's called -d or delimiter. So if you work with JSON or CSV like for data science or something like that, you'll know that like there are CSV files which are like separated by a comma or like tab space or something like that. So if you give it the delimiter and you give it the the S means it's like the field. So for example, here it's I think the second field. Yeah, it's the second field. So because this is this whole content length part is one field, and this is the second field. So it directly gave me the 219 value. So if you're like working with stuff and you want to reduce the output so that you can actually store this in a variable. So I'll get into variables shortly. So now you know what cut is. So cut is generally like really useful. So if you haven't understood what pipes are, I'll go into it a little bit more. So curl basically asked for the HTTP headers of google.com. So google.com servers returned this particular information. This curl, the shell piped it to grep. So what grep did was grep found the value or the line which contained content length. So it returned this line. So you can see it returned only this line, but we wanted only 298. So then again, the Unix pipeline piped this particular output to cut. So what cut did was cut delimited. So this particular space was how it differentiated. This was a bit different field and this was a different field. So we want the second field. So this is 1, this is 2. So we got the second field. So that's how we got only 219. So that's basically how pipelines work. And PWD is present working directory. Okay, so there's one more thing. So say for example, you want to copy the present working directory. Instead of like typing PWD and like copy pasting using your mouse, there's a neat trick. So there's a utility called xclip. So for example, you have to like install it. You can install it using package manager or like however you want to do it. So there's a unique command called. So in GNOME, you have to specify which clipboard you have to use. So in this particular case, GNOME's clipboard is called clipboard. So I'm like piping password like pwd command to xclip. So and I'm telling xclip to select GNOME's keyboard. So like GNOME's keyboard is called clipboard. So I'm telling it to select that particular keyboard, clipboard. So now if I type like enter it, like it won't give me an output. So but if I like paste it, right, so Control Shift V, it'll automatically give me the thing. So it like automatically executed. That shouldn't happen, but you got the gist. So it automatically like copied it to my clipboard. Okay, sorry. Okay, so there's another command called uptime. So uptime just gives you how long the system has been up. So my system has been up since 1 hour 40 minutes, I think. Yeah, so it's been up for like 1 hour 40 minutes, and now this is the current time. And yeah, you can get all this stuff, information like load average and all that. Okay, so date is again another command. It'll give you the like current date. Time again is it'll give you, okay, so you need to like, if you want the Unix epochs time, you'll have to look into it. Okay, so there's another good command called watch. Okay, so what watch is, so generally you want real-time updation, right? So for example, there's a command called free. So what free is basically gives you your memory usage of that particular like system. So for example, now I'm using 1.9 GB of like 6 gigs of RAM. So I want to watch it real time. So I don't want to like keep pressing free.h every 2 seconds or so, like every like 5 seconds or something. So if you want to do it, like if you want the shell to do it retroactively, you can pipe it to watch. So what this does is it'll automatically look for it. So if you like do stuff with it and like open more tabs in Firefox or something like that, you can wait, where did it go? You can like if you open more tabs in Firefox, obviously you'll see the used RAM increase. So that's about it. Okay, so man, again, I've talked about it. It's the manual pages. So whatever command you or whatever utility you've installed, you can directly go here and search for all the. So for example, CP command has archive, has backup. It has I don't know what the references. It has force. It has interactive link and all that stuff, like symbolic links, hard links, and all that stuff. So you can like look into it. You don't have to Google everything. So okay, so I've talked about, okay, so another cool command was TLDR. So generally you want a simple command to do something using your utility. So for, okay, so say TLDR is basically a user driven utility, like users contribute to this. So they write the most common used commands of that particular utility. So for so I think I have ffmpeg installed here. Oh wait, I haven't installed. Okay, so I have to install it. Okay, so TLDR was installed. So for example, say I want to hmm, yeah, okay. I had to like do some stuff. I had it installed on my system. I'm using a VM virtual machine, by the way. So TLDR is basically like it's too long didn't read type of thing. It's like an internet slang. So it gives like so FFmpeg is a video audio utility. So you can like manipulate video and audio using it. It's a very like comprehensive thing. You can check it out here. So I can extract audio from a video using this particular command. So I don't have to Google it. Everything is here. So if I want like a simple command to extract the audio from a particular file, I can do it here. Same thing. So that like you can extract a single frame from a video at this particular time at that particular resolution. So you can do this. So it's pretty useful. So there's a lot of things. So say for example, you want some commands using grep. So you can get all that stuff. So it'll give you like search string to that particular file, or you want to recursively search file, like search for text in a like search for files which include that particular text in a particular directory. So dot means it's that particular directory. So okay, I've talked about pipes. I've talked about grep. If you have any doubt or something, you can ask, because I think I'm going a bit too fast. If you haven't understood anything, you can like put it in the chat and I'll like explain it more in depth for you, like in a more like easier manner to understand. Okay, so variables are a thing in Bash. So just like in any programming language, like the shell also has commands. So foo is the variable, bar is the assignment. So now if I want to access this, it's not just like foo. It doesn't work like that. So say I want to access it, so I have to use a shell utility. So the way you do it is, so if I just do this, it's just going to give me foo, because echo just takes whatever in. So if I want to specify that it's a variable, I have to give the $sign. So that'll give me bar. I think that's, I'll go into a bit about like expansions. So say for example, you want, okay, so cd dot dot basically means the previous directory. So the parent directory. So if I press this, so if I type ls dot dot, it will give me the contents of the parent directory. It won't give me, so scripts is included here. That means it's the parent directory. So like again, so ls dot means it's the current directory. Again, so if I do cd dot dot, it will go to the previous directory. Okay, mkdir. Okay, so there's this cool thing. So say you want to create like a bunch of files. So instead of like doing mkdir test1, test2, test3, mkdir like automatically does something called expansion. So if you do this, it's equivalent to what I just typed. So test1, test2, test3. So now say you want to populate each of these particular files, each of these directories with files. So you want like some generic files inside of them. So say okay, so the way you specify is like this, and then I want to like put like some program file or something. So I can specify this. So what this basically means is I want touch to create empty files in test1, 2, like test1, test2, test3, and each of those particular directories should contain program1, program2, program3.sh. So if I press this, Now obviously you won't see anything, but if I cd into test1 and I display, it'll like have all those files. So okay, so there's a neat trick. So this is again, so this means I want to cd into the parent directory. So dot dot slash dot dot meaning I'll go to home. So if I want to go back, okay, now I think I pretty much covered everything. Okay, there's one more thing I forgot. So say there's a text. Okay, so say I want to push the command. So say hello to test.text. So now if I cat test.text, it'll give me hello. But if I want to say, I want to append to it, right? So this same command, I want to add particular thing. And now if I, so this double like greater than tells me that instead of rewriting the contents of the file, I want you to append to whatever is already in the file. So if I do this, it'll give me hello, hello. But if I try to rerun the single greater than thing, right? So if I do this and I cat again, it will like rewrite the contents of the file and it will push the new output. So, okay, I'll go into a little bit about, I've included some like useful scripts, so I'll be explaining them. Okay, I'll just open them here. Okay, so this is the first file. So we know how to work with arguments in C or Python or something. So in Bash, it basically works as like, it's very simple though. So $1 basically means the first argument to the file. So if you type in args12, one will be like, so this particular thing will be the first argument and $2 will be the second argument. That's easy. So there's another thing called $hash, which basically counts the number of arguments given here. So in this case, if I give arg12, it will be 2. And $0, again, I've mentioned this before, it's the name of the file. Like, so for example, args.s, like args will be the name of the file. So it will give me, it'll like $0 will extend to args. $at basically means it will expand to all the arguments given. So here I just specify one argument. This particular command or like shortcut will expand to all the arguments given to the file. So here it will be 1, 2. So, okay, so like echo command is basically like this. So echo and some string or whatever. I want to, so say for example, you want the argument of the previous command. So in this particular case, $_ gives the argument of the previous command. So whatever argument you gave to a command beforehand, it'll take that and it'll like pipe it to whatever. So here I'm printing previous argument of echo, so it should give test. Okay, so when you're writing scripts, so for example, you write a script and you have to execute a command. Only if that execution succeeds, do you want to continue. So if that execution fails, you have to like exit or you have to like do something else. So the way you can actually achieve that is using this error code management. So $question mark gives you the error code of the last command. So error codes like in C are 0, 1. So 0 means the execution happened correctly. 1 means it happened like there was an error. So in this case, again, so binary management is like, again, it's basically like C. So if false is obviously false, or echo or nice. So this obviously will be true because it's just an echo command. But since it's the or, like the or command, 1, 0 will obviously give me 1. So this will be error code of 1. Wait, no, or command will be 1, 0. So it'll be true. Sorry, my bad. So this won't give me an error. This, on the other hand, will, because it's an AND command. So false and echo nice will raise an error. So it'll give me 1. So if I cd to scripts, so we have args here. So yeah, So it gave me like everything happened as it is. So we gave the arguments 1, 2, and then we got first arg was 1, second arg was 2, and all two args are 1, 2. Echo like test again, it executed here. So and then we got the previous argument. So previous argument of what is this now? Okay, that shouldn't happen. Have I given the? I have. Okay, I think this is a problem because I messed up the path variable. So it'll work on your system. You could try it out. Okay. So then, yeah. Okay. So here, where is that? Okay. So false or echo nice. So obviously it'll like print echo nice, and then it'll give the error code of 0 because it executed without error. But here, because it's an AND command, like an AND operation, false and echo nice. So true and false means it's false. So it'll give 1. So that's basically arguments in a nutshell. Okay, so another thing is I've done a simple calculator in Bash because I mean it's very easy to understand. Sorry. Okay, so this one is again, so clear is a command where you clear the terminal screen with if there's any other commands. Res, okay, so this is again some random variable that you usually use in C. Iter is again iteration, so this we'll get into. So while iteration is equal to y, so since it's y, it will go into the while loop. It's very similar to C, just that you have to like note these particular brackets, and white space is important. It's not like C. So if you mess up, like if there's any space or there's like any issue with space, it just won't run. So like be careful about that. So this again is the syntax. You enter the first number. The command to input is read. R is basically it's a good practice. So sometimes you include backslashes or something like that. That means like that particular backslash basically in any programming language means escape sequence. So it might get like escaped or something. So to avoid that, we use dash R. Echo a second number again. We are already reading the second number. So this again we are echoing 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll enter the choice. So we'll read choice. So this is switch case, very similar to C. So we are finding case CH in. So we're checking if any of those input match. So if one matches, we'll do addition. So num1 num plus num2. So sum equal to this. So the way we do expression management is through the double thing. So single commands are basically, so in the sense, so say for example, you want echo command to print. Okay, so for example, say I want to print the echo command here. So the way you do it is through this syntax. So $ brackets the command. So when you do that, it'll like PWD will be replaced with the command output. So that will give me that. So the same way we're doing it here, but you should note that this is an expression. So this is again a single thing. So we have to wrap that in another bracket. So that's the only difference. And again, so we're accessing res is a variable. So we're equating this to res. So we have to print it out. So we're using sum equal to and ampersand like $res. Same thing again here. Num we're doing this. It's very simple. Okay, so break is this this particular like semicolon semicolon. We don't type break. It's the same as switch case in C. So this is again default. So if in none of those options match, we're doing this echo invalid choice. And okay, so in the thing about bash is the way you go out of switch case. So we don't have like all those like parentheses and all that stuff. So the way you do it is, so since you started case, right, you want to end it. So the way you do it is you type case ulta or like in reverse. It's pretty weird, I know, but that's the standard. Yeah, so then you ask, do you, okay, so this is where iter comes into play. So you want to continue, so then you read iter. So if it's y, then if it's not equal to y, then exit. Otherwise, it will go back to the beginning. That's how while loops work. So I think that was pretty easy. If you want to execute it, we can. So it'll ask me to enter the first number. If I do like multiplication or something, it will give me a thing. And if I exit, it will exit without any problems. So, okay, so CPU temp was something that worked on my system. The problem was you have to install these particular commands, and you have to like this doesn't work on like a virtual box. So like in your system, you can install LM sensors in HGD temp, and then you can run this command and like just give enter, enter, enter. Then you have to find the sensor of your particular CPU. So for my system, it's SBUS master 0. So if I gave this output, it will give me like, so for example, I'll show it to you. So wait. Okay, yeah. So this is my Arch Linux. So if I press this, yeah. So right now it's at 66 degrees Celsius. So because I'm running a virtual box and all that stuff, so it's taking up a lot of power. Okay, so I'm back in my okay, now, okay, so this is a pretty useful command. It's just like one liner. So say you want to find the size of your directory. So the way you can do that is, okay, so dir size, and here I can give the directory size. So right now, so the like tilde sign means home. I think you should be knowing that. So if I gave that to dir size, so my current home directory is 413 megabytes. So it's pretty useful if you like want to like find the size of directories. You can like even list the like entire all the like sizes of all the directories. You can do that. Okay, so this is again something I use personally. So it's pretty complicated, but it's helpful sometimes. So basically, what this does is it encrypts your files and it gives you the password. So this is pretty helpful if you're trying to send something to someone over the internet and you don't want other people to snoop into your particular files. So this checks if the archive. So again, we know $1 means the file. So 7z is again a compression format. So if that particular file exists, we don't want to touch it. So it'll exit. So now we want to check if the file, okay, so when we input the argument, we want to check if this particular file exists or if the directory exists. So if they exist, we'll go into the if condition. So encrypting folder this. So pwgen is another command you can install. What this does is it basically like it generates a very strong password. It's a command line utility. You can use your own password or anything, but this is basically very convenient. 7z is again a compression format, and you can like A means archive, MHE means like this is like both of these two commands mean we are encrypting it with a password. So $1.7z is we basically give the archive name and then the folder. So after this, basically this is basically the main. These two lines are basically the main actors, and then we just print out it's done. Or if the file or directory doesn't exist, then we just print the file or directory not found. So if you want to execute it, so say I have a file called test.txt. Wait, okay, yeah, it's here. Okay, so I want to encrypt it. So if I do that and I give the file name, what is wrong? This is probably messed up because I screwed up the path. Okay, I'll just show you in my Arch. I don't know why I did that. This is very embarrassing. Okay, I have it here. Okay, so this is my system. So say, I think you can still see the screen. If you can't, like, let me know in the chat. So I'm going to create a file called, okay, so the file is there and I'm going to execute the same command. Okay, yeah, so it works here. Doesn't work there. Okay, so here what it does is basically creating archive. So the shell script was again, we like input this. So we have to create. So the input was test.text. So we are creating the archive test.text.7z. So items to compress one, it will compress it here with the password, this thing. So this is pretty like, it's pretty hard to guess and it's pretty hard to crack also. So if I want to open this particular file, I need the password. So if I press the password, I can see the file. So the rest, okay, so what else is there? Okay, okay, so this is pretty neat. Okay, I use this a lot. So mkcd is something that, okay, so sometimes you have to create a directory and then you have to cd into it. It's pretty annoying. This command called mkcd automatically creates a directory and it cds into it. So what this is meaning, mkdir minus p means we have to create the parent directory. So for example, you create like Sagar, friend A, something like that. It'll create the like chain of directories. So it just won't create one directory. Okay, so this is something that is called an escape sequence. So whenever you give like, say for example, I give mkdir, sorry, okay, mkdir, I give like p or something, that's a argument. But when we want to create, so say I want to create a directory called dash text. But if I give it like this, mkdir will take dash test as an argument. We don't want that to happen. So dash dash here just is an escape sequence which avoids this particular scenario. So if we do this, right, we can create directories which have dash as the first character or dash dash. So that's pretty neat. So then and is again, I'm like we are concatenating both commands. So this is like C basically. So mkdir make this and cd minus p, meaning we are like if there's a symbolic link or something like that. Again, you can check the man pages for this. This is again the same thing as that, the before one. We don't want like it to take it as an argument, and we cd into the command like that particular directory. So I think it should be loaded. If it isn't, okay, yeah. So sometimes you have to, you can either do two things. So you can source this particular shell script into the terminal. So if I do source mkcd.sh, mkcd is the file name, it'll like put it into the file. So now if I do mkcd and if I type the directory name, see it automatically. So mkcd made the file and it automatically cd'd me into the file. So it's pretty neat. So if I want to go back, it will give me the thing. So it's like a one-liner. It's pretty neat. What else is there? Okay, server health. Okay, so this is like a pretty big one. Okay, so this is something I just did so that you don't have to like think too much about it. So it's like just to like disambiguate the output. So we have like some 6 commands here. So date is basically, again, we don't know, you know, like it just gives the date. Uptime is again gives the like how much time your computer has been running. WME gives you the number, like the users who are currently connected to the system. Okay, so last logins are basically, so for example, you have like a shared server. So last is useful there. So you can figure out, okay, so these number of people logged in last. So last access, like the last number of people who accessed it. But here we're again piping it to head. So what head is basically, head gives the top 3. So there are 2 like twins here. So head and tail. So head gives the like the top number of outputs. So here last gives some number of outputs. We're piping it to head to give the first 3 outputs, like the first 3 users. Okay, so disk and memory usage. One sec, I'll have a what. Okay, so DF is something that we use to get the like the disk usage. So if I type df.h, it will give me the usage of every particular file system. excuse me. So here you can see that dev SDA5, that is my root directory. So it's 59 gigs. It's been like 9.2 gigs is used and 47 gigs is available. So you can see here it's the root directory. So you can see that there are loads of other things. So there are even like some temp directories and all that stuff. So that's how it works. So this command basically puts that into xargs. So what xargs is it takes inputs from the standard input. So whatever df.h gives, it'll put it into xargs and it'll execute it. Excuse me. So because df.h output is going to xargs, it's executing it and it's pushing it to awk. So again, we talked about awk. It's basically like fancy. It's a more like shell. It's a programming language which you can use to print outputs of like CSV files or tab separated files or something like that. So you can generate reports using it, something like that. So here we're using print. So print again is pretty self-explanatory. So we're printing this particular string. And here, this is actually pretty simple to understand. Here we want to access the 11th column of whatever df.h gave us. So it will access the 11th column, slash will be appended, and then it will access the 9th column. So what this was basically, it will give us the, so this was the 9th column. Okay, yeah, so it will give us the size and it will give us the now use. So it will give like 9.2 out of 59 gigs. And free, again, I think I showed this before. It gives us the like the amount of memory available. So if I go into full screen, yeah, so it'll give us whatever was here. So like I have 5.8 gigs available. I'm using 1.8. What else? Okay. So top is something that it gives us the most used processes of a particular system. So if I go to the manual pages, so it'll display the Linux processes, but it's because we are piping it to head 3, it'll give us the top 3 processes. You can also use head and tail like in combination. So what this does is we are trying to get the number like the processes. We are getting the first 10 processes. So it'll output like till here it'll output the first 10 processes. But since we're piping it to tail, it'll give us the last 4. So out of these 10, it'll give us the last 4 processes. So it's pretty neat. So that's what that command is. So top 10 processes and it'll give us the last 4 processes. Nmap is pretty like neat utility to like check for networks and all that stuff. So it's used for network scanning. So I'll specify the port. So it'll scan till port 1000, and T4 is another argument, which means fast scan. And this particular thing means we're scanning the host system. So you can either use this or you can even type localhost. It will still work fine. Okay, so current connections meaning like your computer has a number of sockets. So your users or your whenever you type in servers, you connect through some particular socket. So you want to see if anybody's connected to your system. So this does that. Okay, so processes again. So this lists all the processes in like like aux f does like it. In a sense, it lists all the processes in your system. If you want to know exactly what they do, you can go to the man pages again. So it'll be here. Yeah, so you can check it out here. So everything is listed there. Okay, so VMstat is again, I don't know, like I just found the script day before yesterday just to like show you guys. VMstat is again is like if I go, I think I let the man page explain it for you. So it just gives information about process and memories and like paging. I've never come across this, but I thought I'd just like include it just so you know it exists. Even I learned this like day before yesterday. So it's pretty neat. I mean, it'll give you like the process information, memory, and like other stuff. You can read about it more in the man pages. So now, like, you know, you can see all this bold green and text RFC. You'll understand when I execute the script. So if I execute server health, Yeah, so you can see that it's green. I just did that so it's easier for you guys to see the like output. So if I go up, yeah, okay, so it's here. So date executed it and gave us this. Uptime executed and gave us what the output. Process status, I think this was what. Yeah, it was last login, I think. This was the users. So like I'm currently logged in. So I like login since. Okay, I don't know what that is. Last logins are again. So I'm the only user. Reboot is another user you can use to like reboot your systems and stuff like that. So again, the AWK output gave us 2.9 gigs of 2.9 gigs. So this is the disk memory, and total memory usage was this out of like 2,400 MB out of like 6 gigs. Okay, so the top command again, so it gave us the most expensive processes. So if you can see here, I think there wasn't any number of like much number of processes, so just gave us the last three. So, but if you have a lot of stuff running, it'll give you more out. Like it'll give you like the four. Where is it? Okay, so this is head three, so it gave us three, and yeah, I think that wasn't necessary. Yeah, this is the same thing. So those two commands just gave us this because there are not like many number of processes running. So right now GNOME shell and Xorg is the like the most running system process. Okay, so Nmap again gave us, so Nmap is again what I told you, like it's a network scanner. So Nmap scan report for localhost. So localhost is your system and it gives this address internally, and it says that my host is up, obviously because it's my system. Uh, so one port was kind of like open, like it was closed. That means I'm not sure what this is, but it's something related to Ubuntu. Generally, nothing should be open. Uh, Current connections. Oh yeah, okay. So this is the current connections to your sockets. So right now there are 5 connections to TV, like the TCP sockets. There are a total of 1014. You can check here. So these are again network packets, so you can directly check it out. Raw UDP, like user datagram protocol or transmission control protocol and all that stuff. You can check it out. You can check out the OSI model and things like that to understand what this is. This was process, so it gave us like so what F does is, so AUX gives all the processes of a system. F gives it in a tree style. So you can see it's in a tree format, like something like something of that kind. So that's what it basically does. So all this is your processes in your system. There are quite a lot. So VMstat again, so like it checks what processes, it checks the memory. If if it's been used by swap, input output, what is there, if anything going on, your system like resources, what is it using, and if it's using any CPU resources. So that's what VMstat does. I think okay, yeah, I forgot about weather. So weather is pretty neat. Wait, oh yeah, I haven't. Wait, it didn't format correctly. Okay, it didn't format correctly for some reason. Yeah, it's definitely not formatting. Okay, wait, I'll just show it in my system. Yeah, okay, it's much better formatted now. So you can see that weather is like, it gives us the particular weather report for it. It's pretty neat. You can do everything in the terminal. So you can see that, so weather basically like, there's this website called, what it's wttr.in. So it automatically like configures your request. So your IP, like your IP sends a request using your like ISP, right? So your ISP knows where you're located in which city and stuff like that. So it automatically configures it. So it automatically gave me Bangalore. So it'll give me information on all that stuff, and yeah, that's pretty. It's nice. You can do like get the weather information through the terminal. What else? I think that's about it. I had like I think I went too fast. If you want me to like redo something, you can ask in chat. Yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah, I've covered everything I wanted to cover, but I think I went a bit too fast.
Yeah, Sagar, it was a nice session. So are you done? Like, have you covered everything that you wanted to for the session?
Yeah, but I do have something, but I think it will take too long if I start it. It's like server management. This is like my system management, but if I did like server management, it'll take another one, like an hour and a half. So
All right.
probably I'll keep that for a next like future session.
Okay, so we have one question from Anurag Bhaiya himself. So he's asking, why do you use Arc?
Okay, so this is okay. So normally, okay, so if I go to DistroWatch, okay, so DistroWatch is like pretty, it's like it covers, it like records all the updates of particular distributions and which is popular, which isn't. So you can see that there are updates or like stuff like that. So I got this website, like I saw this website like I think 6 years ago, and I tried pretty much every like major one. So at that time it was like Ubuntu Elementary, Fedora, Solus, Zorin wasn't there. There was like open source and like Arch was in there, but like all the top 10 were like easily installable. So I tried all of it. But then somebody in some forum, like I think it was on XDA or something, they told me about Manjaro. So I installed Manjaro and I found out about Arch. So then like it was about, I think it took me like 3 months or something to install Arch properly at the beginning. This was in like 2016. But once I installed it, it was amazing. I mean, Ubuntu is like, there's a lot of things wrong with it. So there's if you know what Snap is, it's very like it's like kind of like Canonical is kind of gatekeeping it like Google. So the Google Play Store is like your one and only source like for most apps. So if you like uh, I mean you can't like install it anywhere else. So here this is like Canonical is again like they do a lot of things that I don't like. So I generally don't like Ubuntu, but it's the most usable system. So yeah, so Arch again is more streamlined. It's a community-based distribution. So everything that's done is done by a community, like a very close-knit community, and it's very nice. It's like configurable. So everything you do is like from the ground up. You have to configure everything. So you can like have the system as you like it. So I have everything I want. So for example, there's this neat command called neofetch. It will give this output. So you can see that I have whatever I want installed. So everything is configured to my liking. But if I go to Ubuntu, it's a bit different. I mean, like uh, they kind of like push things that I don't want, and it's pretty. I don't like it so much. So you can see that they're like pushing Snap onto me, even though I don't want to use Snap, but I don't have a choice. Flatpak is a thing, but it'll break some stuff. So Arch, on the other hand, is very nice. I mean, if you guys want to learn Linux, just by installing Arch, you will be able to like. So just by installing Arch, you'll like learn all of this. Just like whatever I taught, you'll learn most of it. So there's like instead of like going through a guide, going through a YouTube video, try to install Arch out by yourself without using anything. That's why it took me 3 months. I never like checked any guide. I checked the wiki and all that stuff. So the Arch wiki is again something that is amazing. So everything you do, everything is also. So for example, you want to secure your system. So there is even an option called security. So it will teach you good practices. So it will like choose you like all these concepts and passwords. everything is like, so they'll even talk about password hashes and all that stuff. So they talk about enforcing passwords, and there's a lot of stuff. There's like, it's all community written, so nobody's paying anybody to write all this. So it's pretty neat. So everything like it's more like streamlined and it's more nice. The community is nice. I mean, many people consider Arch elitist, but they're not. So that's why I use Arch. It's a nice system, and I, after like 3 years of distro hopping, I settled on Arch. I haven't looked back since.
All right. So, okay, so if I'm a beginner and I'm trying out different distros, how do I figure out like what will cater to my needs? Like, I think that might be a question that many beginners might have.
1 second. Okay, yeah. So again, so DistroWatch is one more thing. So there are like generally there's 3 to 4 different types of distributions, like majorly. So one is Debian. So Ubuntu and Mint are both Debian based. So even MX Linux is Debian based. So Debian is another system. It's pretty. I think it's like the first Linux distribution. It was established in 1994 and it's been there ever since. It's an amazing distribution. It's very like, if you, many people use this for servers because it's stable. You can use this for like desktops also. So Ubuntu, Mint, and MX Linux are all Debian based. Even Pop! OS and Elementary, they're both like, Pop! OS is Ubuntu and Elementary, like Ubuntu and Debian based. It's like a combination. So Fedora was again like another system by itself. So these like 4 different types of distros are major, and every other distribution is a part of it. So when you when you first go into it, many people go into Ubuntu. So Ubuntu is like the most popular distribution, and it's like it works. So like you can just like install it, and everything is working off the bat. So you don't have to configure everything. So many people like this. So if you want to just get your feet wet, you can use Ubuntu, and then you can uh, yeah, you can get your feel, like you can like understand how Linux works, and you can get the basics down. Once you're comfortable with it, you can try like more like configurable distribution. So one thing like Fedora is where is Fedora? Okay, so Fedora is very like streamlined distribution. The updates are like a lot every day. There are like hundreds of megabytes of updates. So it's a very fast moving distribution. So this basically means that all your you'll be using experimental software and all that stuff. So things might break, things might get like some things might completely stop working. So it'll teach you like how to manage systems. So after that, you can like try like there are plenty of stuff. I mean, like there are n number of distributions. It's basically your like just go into it and learn something and come out. Gentoo is another thing. So Gentoo is I mean, this is like the top level. If you can install this, you should know how, like, you basically know like 90% of Linux. So just by installing it, you'll have to know a lot of stuff. You'll have to know like compiler flags and like how like software is compiled, how like how long it takes, and you need to know a lot of things. So it's not just like one click install. So it might take anywhere from 8 hours to like 2 days to install it. Once I installed the Gentoo on like VirtualBox, and it took me like 3 days on like one processor core. That was nice. That was fun. And yeah, so in the end, at the end, it's just your personal preference. There's no real what you call like. There's no real like you have to use this distro, like hackers use Kali Linux. There's nothing like that. You can use whatever and you can make it work.
All right. So I guess if anybody wants to ask a few other questions, yeah, Aditya has one question. Isn't Mac OS X also Unix based? So yeah, I am currently using Mac, so yeah, it's Unix based, and it will almost support all the commands and everything that Sagar showed over here. So yeah, it's pretty good as well. It's stable for the most part. Few recent versions were a bit shaky, but yeah, for the most part, it's good. But the only, I would say, disadvantage of using Mac OS X is it locks you into the Apple, so-called Apple
Yeah.
ecosystem. So if you want a lot of really good third-party apps, you have to find your way around them. So
So
most things are available. Are into, yeah, Hackintosh is one way to do it. So a lot of people have built modules that aren't basically MacBook, but they can run Mac OS. So yeah, that's what the nickname for it is Hackintosh. So yeah,
No, I
basically
mean
Mac
like
OS is,
yeah, but see,
but
Mac
yeah,
OS is Unix based, but the problem with Mac OS is, so for example, Apple really messed up backwards compatibility. So for example, say I can, so GNU Emacs is a text editor, so I think you guys should be like familiar with this. If you aren't, you can check it out. You can just type Emacs, GNU Emacs on Google, and it'll like give you the thing. So what this is, this was written in 1976. Okay, so it hasn't changed much. It's like there's more features and like Emacs 27.1 is out, so it's like continuously evolving. So I can install a GNU Emacs version from 1995 and it will still work on Linux. But the problem with Mac was so for example, I tried to run software that was written for uh, a Mac IO, like a Mac version written for 2005, it won't work. So Apple like really like screwed up like backwards compatibility. So another like free BSD is again like Unix compliant. So the most popular, like one of the most popular ones are FreeBSD. So this is based on the BSD 4.4 by like Berkeley like Berkeley the Berkeley Institute. So
yeah.
this was again in 1995 or something, and then they branched out and they made it their own thing. So this is how what like a Unix based thing is. But again, Mac is like Yash told, they like rope you into the Apple ecosystem and you're like set there. They don't give you much options elsewhere.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons for backwards compatibility is that they used to use something called as Power CPU or some chip system that was before Intel. Then they, I think, migrated to Intel pretty late, but they did it, I think, around 2000s. So all the applications that were made for the MacBook for that previous chip system, they got useless. They had some migration software, but it was pretty buggy. So now the
Yeah.
main concern is if you are updated about the news, Apple is making its own silica. And it's really exciting because, like, if you know about chip technology that Apple uses in its phones and iPhones, it's pretty stellar. And they'll be putting
Yeah,
it into MacBook, expecting really
yeah.
good
You can't
results.
deny Apple has amazing hardware.
Completely. So, like Windows systems, Linux systems right now, and even Macs use Intel. But when Apple actually switches to the Apple Silica, it's said that the virtual machines and all that thing will suffer a lot, will take a hit. So we'll see how that plays. But yeah, it will be an interesting transition. According to Apple, they'll take 2 years for it. So yeah, again, we are going on a tangent. We'll come back to the question. So Anirudh had one question. So it's that what are your comments about Windows using Linux kernels, subsystem Linux?
I mean, like Microsoft is going in the right direction. So, I mean, like say like 10 years ago, Microsoft, like the Microsoft CEO completely condemned Linux, saying that it was useless and stuff like that. And now, if you look at it, they're completely like Microsoft is the biggest contributor to open source. It's kind of ironic. So, if you think about it that way, Microsoft is again like they're not like, see, Apple has become a gatekeeper for everything Apple. It's been like that since the beginning of Apple, so that's not a surprise. So Windows is again like Windows like WSL is good, but I don't think it's like functional. You can just use like if you have to use Windows and then you can't like you don't have an option to use Linux, you can use WSL. They're going in the right direction. I like there's some amazing stuff like the developers are doing, but it's still not as good as like just using like a normal Linux distribution.
Yeah. So yeah. Wait, I'll just if you guys want to talk, just let me know in the chat. I'll unmute you guys. I'm unmuting right now. Anurag Bhaiya, we can have a conversation. It's like a casual session, right? So I can unmute you guys as well.
Yeah, hey Sagar, actually on the WSL, actually I wanted to say something. I don't know, like I heard it somewhere, like I read it somewhere, kind of. So it's like what Microsoft is trying to do is like, just for the beginner's sake, like I'm not talking about the pro users of Linux, but for the beginner's sake, like if you are, giving them a shell within the Windows, like don't you think it will be very hard for them to migrate from Windows to Linux? Like they will be like, okay, I'm getting the shell over here. Don't you think like Microsoft is going towards in that direction with WSL2 and all?
Yeah, I mean that's the main goal, right? So
Hmm.
any operating system provider wants you to use their operating system more than any other operating system. So the reason why Microsoft is like doing WSL is to get users to use Linux in Windows. So they don't
Yeah, so
want people to migrate away
hmm.
from Windows.
Actually they are trying to crush this Linux ecosystem for the beginners. I'm like the pro users will eventually gonna use Linux. So yeah.
Yeah, Linux is going to go away, but like people
Hmm.
like Microsoft is doing everything in their power to make people use Windows more than Linux.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
basically reducing
that's kind of evil
your
actually.
no, from a company's perspective, I don't think it's that evil. They are
No,
doing
like
what's going for them.
from a open source perspective, like because Microsoft behaves like he's they're like kind of messiah of open source, like they own the GitHub now and all those things, and
Yeah,
they pay a huge amount of money to open source projects as well. So on a one front, like they are powering up open source like a lot, and on the other front, like they are trying to trump it down. That's what I
yeah,
felt like after reading all that.
yeah. That actually is a point. Good point. Yeah. Anirudh has few comments and Aditya has few comments. You guys can check your chats.
Yeah, what do you mean by
Yeah,
the percentage
I
of?
can actually unmute you guys if you want. I'll just
Yeah, you can
unmute you.
unmute
You guys can
Aditya if
talk.
you want to like unmute. You can like.
Yeah, yeah,
I think
Aditya,
you
I have
can.
given you the.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for that. I'll speak when I get something. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
sure.
Like we are just having a casual conversation. And whoever wants to speak, you guys just ask. I'll unmute you.
Yeah, but right now,
And
whatever Windows is trying to do with their cell operating integration to the Windows interface, I guess it's gonna just go like the way they did with the Windows OS, like back in 2013 and 14. Like they're just gonna lose their higher authority of being the most used operating system. Maybe even that can happen, or they might turn out doing something really amazing. Who knows what's gonna happen?
Yeah, I
True.
mean that's
Next.
the main the reason why they wanted to make Windows OS was because many people are comfortable with Windows, but so they wanted to like get people to use Windows phones, but that failed spectacularly. So now if like WS like Windows subsystem is, I mean like there's a lot of mixed feelings from many people, but it's kind of going fine. I mean like now there's like talks about Windows incorporating the Linux kernel source code into its own kernel. So I'm not sure where. I mean like in another few years it might come out to like the Windows kernel uses a lot of the Linux kernel source code or something like that. So anything can happen.
WSL2 is a step in towards that direction itself. Like because we are not using any the network bindings in that, like it's kind of just exact kernel Linux kernel that we are using in a VM VM environment in WSL2.
Even like Windows did a like pretty good amazing job like bringing PowerShell to the Windows 10 operating system. Like that was really a good change.
Yeah,
But
PowerShell is cool.
yeah,
PowerShell
but the
is
thing
good,
is
yeah.
like, yeah, but there are like a lot of security breaches that I've read about articles in Windows 10 or like a lot of security issues. And coming to the Linux side, like it's a bit safer on from the attacks and all.
No, see the thing about that is the reason why there are so many exploits for Windows systems is because there are a lot of users for Windows compared to Linux. So when you have threat actors trying to write like create exploits, it's more they want to like target a larger audience.
Yeah,
So like see there are Linux exploits, but Linux exploits are very hard to come by, and usually they are like done by people who have a lot of resources and like time, and like they have a lot of like a bigger team. So like the NSA, okay, you don't know, like none of us know that like, and the NSA can have a backdoor to any Linux system. So there's no way to tell that they don't or they do. So it's only like if like they mess up and somebody finds the backdoor and they leak it, that's the only way we'll get to know it. So state actors and like people who have the money and resources, they can find exploits for any system. So there's no telling that Mac is also safe. Apple is again is like is like deemed to be safe, but it's not exactly like confirmed. So Apple is offering like $1 million for an exploit for their iOS system, but anybody in the dark market can sell that for like upwards of $10 million. So why would they go for like Apple's $1 million? So what is public is different from what is private. So you don't know what is like currently the number of exploits for each, like number of like crazy, dangerous level of exploits for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS.
Is there any ways that way we can contribute so that games will be supported on Linux?
Isn't there Steam supporting that, like natively Steam, and there's another one?
Yeah, there's
starting
Proton
there.
DB and
Proton,
Node.js.
yeah.
So means every game is not supported, right?
There was some update on the
New
version
games
side.
that comes every month. Is
Like
there any
even
way
you,
so that we can contribute so it will be
like
native on Linux, I guess?
there was this emulator called Wine, okay?
Yeah, Wine I
WINE.
have used. Some games doesn't work. Some cracks doesn't work in Wine.
Mine is not reliable, dude. Like even I used it, I deleted it. It's not very
Yeah,
reliable.
Yeah, Proton is much better. Steam
yeah,
is
Proton
like,
is very good.
yeah.
Yeah, if you want to do gaming, I think I hate to say it, but Windows is still the better OS.
Yeah, I don't use Linux for gaming. I just have Minecraft installed. That's the only thing I have.
Yeah,
It's only on
Minecraft
works,
works
actually.
on every OS.
Yeah.
But I never got a hold of my Minecraft plan. I think I found it like found it intriguing, but I just never tried it. I don't know. Yeah, last I remember, like Sagar, like after the hackathon when we came back, like Sagar, what did you do with the prize money? Like I bought Minecraft. So
My dad is
so
not
yeah.
happy.
Shubham, which bootloader do you use? Do you use Grub or OpenFlow? Which one do you use?
I guess he's not here. Or I
No,
think
no.
Yash.
No, he's in the
Uh,
charts. He's in the charts. I can see him there.
Okay.
No, like Shubham, like even I have a dual boot. Like I have a dual boot of Ubuntu 20 and Windows. Like I just updated my laptop yesterday, and my Grub is still there. I guess it might be your EFI partition that might have something issue with that.
Oh, he has a problem with the installation.
No, like he said that every time he updates his window, like his Grub disappears. He has to reinstall Ubuntu.
That's strange.
No, that's because your grub config doesn't have like it's not configured properly. So once you install it, you'll have to regenerate the grub config, so it'll like detect that there's Linux and there's Windows installed. So I mean, I can help you if like later. I mean, it's I mean, I'm complicating it, but it's not that hard.
Yeah, you can post about it, like whatever the error
Yeah.
you're getting in the help section or Discord, I think.
Yeah, you can
Yeah,
contact
like
me on
we have,
Discord.
yeah, we have the whole Discord channel over there. You guys, we can continue the discussion over there because I think we are running out of meeting time on Zoom, right?
Yeah.
So
Cool.
I guess we'll wrap up. Again, thank you guys for staying throughout the end. And yeah, we'll see you in the next seminar. All right. Okay, bye.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Bye,
thanks
everyone.
for coming, everyone.
Yeah. Bye.
Right.